Hey, good afternoon to you. It is 3:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, Emily Jashinsky joins us from the Federalist. We talked to her at 3:30 about all that election meddling, once again, by the intel agencies. Lots of news reporting on that this week. Emily weighs in on it coming up. Mike Davis is here at 4:30. We talked to him about the latest as the porn lady wraps up her testimony in New York. We'll give you the blow-by-blow. And Ben Weingarten is ahead at 5:30. We talked to him from Real Clear Investigations about Joe Biden. His red line when it comes to Israel is finishing off Hamas. That can't happen, says Joe. We'll get to that and so much more. We'll get to your calls at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Boy, oh boy. Joe Biden had quite the Wednesday, didn't he? In Wisconsin. Sleepy Joe. He spent the day yesterday, well, first of all, just rambling. He had that great Swedish chef moment yesterday where he sounded like he was trying to introduce somebody and you had no idea what he was even saying.
Liz Schuller, President, I'll say I thank you for all you do for benefit of the American Union movement.
Yeah, I know, right? Like,
It
it doesn't even make any sense. Like you can't understand a word that's coming out of his mouth. But to the extent that you could understand any of the words that were coming out of his mouth yesterday, he did have this one story that I wanted to revisit because I was like, this is not true. In fact, when we played it for you yesterday, I said, I bet you dollars to donuts this is a false story. This is a Bidenism.
I went to a Catholic high school in Delaware taught by the Norbertine priest from St. Norbert's College. A little team called Green Bay. Now, here's the deal. We were the only high school in Delaware that overwhelmingly rooted for Green Bay. Not a joke, I'll tell you why. Every single Sunday. Not only did they have great teams at the time, we still do, but not only that, my theology professor at the Catholic school I went to was a guy named Riley, last name. And he had been drafted by the Green Bay Packers. And he decided to become a priest before that, so he didn't go. But every single solitary Monday that Green Bay won, we got the last period of the day off. Now, we Catholics call that indirect bribery, but it worked.
Yeah, and the Bidens know something about bribery. Now, as far as this story goes, this idea that, he had a theology professor at his school in Delaware who was drafted by the Green Bay Packers. Well, those are specifics, aren't they? Those are the kinds of things you could check. And if we had a real fact-checking industry and not just one that was a bunch of partisan hacks trying to constantly distort the words coming out of Donald Trump's mouth and then saying, he's lying, then they might fact-check that with some aggression and some speed, some alacrity. There you go. But that's not what happened yesterday. No, that's not what happened. In fact, it was left to the usual suspects, the good guys, to fact-check this one. Stephen Nelson at the New York Post has the following headline up now. Biden falsely claims his Catholic school teacher was drafted by Green Bay Packers during Wisconsin appearance. Dateline Washington. President Biden blurted Wednesday that one of his childhood Catholic school teachers was drafted by the Green Bay Packers, an assertion disproven by a simple check of publicly available NFL records. The 81-year-old president shared the false claim as he boasted of his connection to Wisconsin sports fans during a trip to the swing state. My theology professor at the Catholic school I went to was a guy named Riley, last name, and he had been drafted by the Green Bay Packers, Biden said in Racine, south of Milwaukee. And then they go on to further quote him about how he decided to become a priest instead. According to Pro Football Reference, the Packers have only drafted a single person with the last name Riley, or Riley. Those are all various spellings of the same name. Since the NFL began its annual college draft in 1936, so the records go all the way back to 1936, the Packers have only ever drafted one person with any variation of the spelling of the name Riley. It was University of Colorado quarterback Maurice Tex Riley, selected with the 202nd overall pick in the 22nd round of the 1947 draft. after his education was interrupted by World War II, during which he commanded bombing missions over the Pacific, according to a 2002 article in the Denver Post. Instead of playing professional football, the Bronze Star recipient rejoined the U.S. Air Force in October of 1947 as a civil engineer and then was deployed to Japan and later Spain. Riley also served as an instructor at bases in Ohio and Alabama before retiring as a major general, not to be confused with a Catholic priest. A major general, according to his military biography. The White House, what did they say? What did the White House have to say about this? You guessed it. They did not immediately respond to the New York Post's request for comment. Biden has previously told a different version of the Packers story, describing how Archmere Academy's headmaster, Father Justin Dinney, would dismiss students early in celebration of Packers victories. The president has a long record of embellishing stories in an attempt to establish a personal connection with his audiences. just makes things up. Just makes things up. Then they have some of his greatest hits here. They say Biden in 2021 told Jewish leaders he remembered spending time at and going to Pittsburgh's Tree of Life Synagogue in 2018 after the worst anti-Semitic attack in U.S. history. 11 people murdered then. Synagogue officials said Biden never visited the house of worship. And the White House later said he was thinking about a 2019 phone call. It's pretty different than spending time at and, quote, going to the synagogue. He had a phone call over a year later. Just last month, Biden attempted to underscore his links to his childhood home of Scranton, Pennsylvania, by visiting a war memorial that bears his Uncle Ambrose Finnegan's name, then twice claimed his uncle may have been eaten by cannibals. He actually died when his plane crashed in the Pacific Ocean. So, anyway, in case you were looking for a breaking news update, Joe Biden is a liar. He tells fish tales, and he doesn't even go fishing. He's just making it all up, every last element of it. Also, he had that interview last night on CNN. They don't let Biden do these very often, including with friendly networks like CNN. And Erin Burnett is the person who conducted the interview, and she asked the questions in a very gentle way. If you haven't heard this by now, it was very like, I'm so sorry I have to ask this, but a lot of like whispering and kind of giving him assists whenever his brain got stuck, those types of things. But it just did not go well. Despite their best efforts, did not go well for Joe. Here's a little bit of it.
Why should people here believe that you will succeed at creating jobs where Trump failed?
He's never succeeded in creating jobs, and I've never failed.
What is going on with his voice? And I have never failed, he says.
I've created over 15 million jobs since I've been president. 15 million in three and three-quarters years. And secondly, Microsoft is...
Now, okay, so I was watching this interview, and the whole time I was thinking, that's a lie. That's a lie. That was a lie. That was a half-truth. Here's what he's not telling you. This is how I watch these things now. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse. But so when he gives this line about all these jobs that he supposedly created, he's saying that the government took its boot off of the throat of American businesses during the pandemic. And so he wants credit for people being able to go back to work after being forced out of their jobs by the government. That's what we made so many jobs. No, you didn't. You just stopped screwing with them, at least to that extent.
3 and three-quarters years. And secondly, Microsoft is a serious player, and they're very much engaged in making sure that they pick this area as sort of the home base for their AI initiative in the nation. And they're gonna do it. And and by the way, well, I shouldn't go into it, but
what?
Trump is...
What is that line, by the way? I listened to that. I must have listened to that 7 times. I have no idea what he said. He goes, blah, 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 blah. And by the way...
In the nation. And they're gonna do it. And and by the way, well, I shouldn't go into it, but Trump is... He started off with the golden shovels,
For the groundbreaking.
For the groundbreaking.
Yeah.
Erin has to help him.
This being,
He can't find the word groundbreaking. He's like, he's just picturing images in his head, golden shovels.
the eighth wonder of the world. When has he ever done anything he said? I'm not being facetious.
Well, he got us down to record low unemployment. That was pretty amazing. I thought that was a worthwhile endeavor. It didn't get us into any new wars. That was pretty great. Things were really humming up until that Dr. Fauci cooked up pandemic.
Think about it. He started off, he lost, other than Herbert Hoover, he's the only other president who lost more jobs than created in his 4-year term.
So he wants credit for the jobs that he, quote, created, and then he wants to punish Trump for the jobs that the government wrecked. Isn't that great? He lost all these jobs. I created all these jobs. Everything's a lie with this guy. Everything's a lie with this guy. He made some other big economic claims in here as well. He claimed that when he came into office, inflation was at 9%.
But let me say it this way. When I started this administration, people were saying there's going to be a collapse in the economy. We have the strongest economy in the world. Let me say it again, in the world.
Although GDP last week was far short of expectations.
I don't know how to say this, but it's not that strong. That's what Erin Burnett, in so many words, she's like, well, did you see the GDP report?
The world.
Although GDP last week was far short of expectations.
Oh, it wasn't. Look, GDP still...
it wasn't?
Look at the response of the markets.
The response
Overwhelmingly
of the markets.
positive. Overwhelmingly positive. And one of the reasons why people feel good about it not being as strong as it was before...
The people love that it's not as strong as it was before.
...is they believe that the Fed's going to respond.
They hope they're going to get a rate cut.
Yeah. Well, no president's had the run we've had in terms of creating jobs and bringing down inflation. It was 9% when I came to office. 9%. But look, people have a right to be concerned.
It was not 9%. It was so not 9% that even ABC News fact-checked this morning.
It was 9% when I came to office. 9%.
Inflation was actually 1.4% when Biden was sworn in, peaking at 9.1% in June 2022.
Who was president then? Wait a second. Help me do the math here. So he gets in office at 1.4%. That's in January of 2021. And then a full year and a half later, June of 2022, it's above 9%.
Sworn in, peaking at 9.1% in June 2022. It has since come down to 3.5%, preventing a further drop. Housing costs. In New York City, one survey found rent is rising 7 times faster than wages. In California, a condo in West Hollywood just sold for a record-smashing $24 million. Food costs also playing a role. Grocery prices are up 26% since 2019. And fast food prices are up 33%.
Okay, so ABC is saying, I don't know what this guy's talking about. It's not that great out there. But Biden's insisting it is great. And he says, you know what? It's the people who are wrong. It's not me. It's you dummies.
So when you talk about the economy, of course, it is by far the most important issue for voters. It's also true right now, Mr. President, that voters by a wide margin trust Trump more on the economy. They say that in polls. And part of the reason for that may be the numbers. And you're aware of many of these, of course. The cost of buying a home in the United States is double what it was when you look at your monthly costs from before the pandemic.
Double.
Real income, when you account for inflation, is actually down since you took office. Economic growth last week, far short.
Meaning you're poorer now.
Of expectations. Consumer confidence, maybe no surprise, is near a 2-year low. With less than 6 months to go to Election Day, are you worried that you're running out of time to turn that around?
Running out of time? He spent the whole time making it worse.
We've already turned it around. Look at the Michigan survey. For 65% of American people think they're in good shape economically. They think the nation's not in good shape, but they're personally in good shape. The polling data has been wrong all along.
You are an idiot, is what Joe Biden's saying. You're an idiot. The economy's great, and you don't know it. And he points to some of this data. There are people who personally will report that they can handle their own finances right now. But I really think that to the extent that polling data reflects anything, it's the self-determination of the respondent. If you were to ask any of us about, can you handle the finances in your household? Are you able to manage it? Are you able to feed your family? People say, if they think it's a commentary on themselves personally and what they're able to withstand, they'll say, yeah, I can do it. I'll figure out a way to make ends meet. We're going to trim back over here, but I'm going to feed my family. I'm going to pay the rent. I'm going to get everything taken care of. But that is not some sort of sign that they think the economy is great. It's not. People are poorer, not just on average, but wide majorities of people are now poorer than they were when Joe Biden took office. Poorer. Because their wages have not kept up with their expenses, as Erin Burnett just laid out. The cost of housing has doubled? Doubled. It's because those rates are skyrocketing in order to try and pour some water, at least a little bit, on the fire of this inflation, spurred on by Washington and Joe Biden as he waltzes into office and then puts another $2 trillion in spending on the table right away, and it explodes inflation. It's the government that did this. Biden would, later claim in this interview, and I'll play it for you in a moment, he's blaming the corporations for this. He says the reason expenses are up, he says, I love that they want to have it both ways. Actually, the economy's great, and you just don't know it. Also, the economy's awful, and it's the corporations' fault, he's saying. And he once again tells another lie. The second I heard it, I go, well, there's another one. There's another one. It's coming.
Tomorrow on the Chris Plant Show, Joe Biden lies that he inherited 9% inflation when it was really 1.4%. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
But there's real pain. I mean, grocery prices are up 30%, more than 30% since the beginning of the pandemic. And people are spending more on food and groceries than they have at any time, really, in the past 30 years. I mean, that's a real day-to-day pain that people feel.
It really is. And it's real. But the fact is that if you take a look at what the people have, they have the money to spend. It angers them and angers me that you have to spend more. For example, the whole idea of this notion that Senator Casey talked about, shrinkflation. I think it's on your
Same
program.
price for a smaller bottle of juice or something.
Aaron Burnett is to help him.
Snickers bar, they did a thing, and it's like 20% less for the same price.
Okay, well, there you go again, Joe. Another lie. Snickers back in March responded. Biden said this during the State of the Union, too. Headline, New York Post, Snickers denies Biden's State of the Union accusation that it has reduced candy bar sizes in, quote, shrinkflation. They debunked the president's statement on X, quote, we have not reduced the size of Snickers singles or share size in the United States. Like many industries, we continue to face high inflation, wink, wink, Joe Biden, and spikes in material costs. However, we work to absorb these extra costs wherever possible to provide affordable treats and the best value. In other words, the Mars Candy Company says, we're not even passing on all of our expenses, and we kept the candy bars the same size, you big liar. And he keeps doing it. Emily Jashinsky joins us next. We'll talk to her about the intel community and their desire to spy on you and prevent you from getting information. Hey, good afternoon to you. 3:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL. We're making sense of the news. Coming up, Mike Davis joins us. We'll talk about the porn lady's testimony wrapped up today in New York. We'll chat with Mike about that. I'm resisting making so many double entendre jokes about this subject. Ben Weingarten will be with us at 5:30 as well. We talked to him about about Joe Biden's decision to back away from supporting Israel just as they're on the verge of victory over Hamas. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Let us bring in the excellent Emily Jashinsky, now culture editor at the Federalist, host of Federalist Radio Hour and the host of the Counterpoints podcast as well. Emily, who does it all, is now here as well. Emily, good to talk to you.
Hey, Vince, good to be here.
I want to talk about the intel agencies and what they're up to, because I was hoping that we'd left this all behind in 2020, but it turns out we're not so lucky. We've got less than 6 months to go until the election, and we got a report this week that the Biden intel agencies have all begun once again resuming their censorship relationships with the big tech companies. In fact, it was Senate Intel Committee Chairman Mark Warner who revealed this week that all of these intel agencies they're all fired up again, talking to the big tech companies and urging them to censor content that they claim is disinformation. Should we be nervous about this?
I mean, absolutely, we should be nervous about this. My colleague Sean Fleetwood over at the Federalist, as soon as Mark Warner made that comment, reached out to the FBI basically to confirm that it was true. And the FBI, in response to Sean's request, immediately confirmed, basically, I think it was within like an hour, confirmed that, yes, indeed, they had begun they reopened those communications channels with those big tech companies. And it's a very big deal because we've seen exactly what happened. I mean, part of the revelation from the Twitter files is that they were basically in constant communication with the social media networks, the social media giants, about what information they deemed to be worthy of platforming and what kind of disinformation that they were worried about. And we saw how it worked out. We saw, in fact, there's a case in front of the Supreme Court right now that many people probably knew as Murphy v. Missouri, a huge case right now in front of the Supreme Court about how some of these relationships between, for example, the government and a publisher, a platform, like a social media company is supposed to go, rather than seeing so much pressure from the government for essentially outright censorship.
Yes.
Of things that they deem to be unworthy of platforming. So it's a really big deal. I think it's not surprising at all that it happened, in the lead up to a presidential election. They want to have that power. The government wants to have those communications too. They think it's good.
Yes.
So, even though the evidence suggests otherwise.
Yeah, in fact, in that Murphy v. Missouri case, Judge Terry Doughty, who put out that first huge ruling on the subject, he said that this constituted the gravest threat to the First Amendment in our country's history, the way that the government was using these big tech companies to censor the American people. And as usual, Emily, it seems that the government is justifying this by suggesting that they're keeping us safe. Therefore, it overwhelms whatever concern they might have to have about the First Amendment and our civil liberties.
Right. And again, to them, they think it's actually really important that they have these abilities. This is one of the funniest things about the Biden administration, to the extent it can be funny at all. The Biden administration's efforts to pressure these companies is they were public about it. They many times weren't even trying to hide it. They were openly bragging about it because there's now something we have to deal with, is reality that a big chunk of the Democratic base of the professional left doesn't just kind of want this to happen in secret. They demand it, and they demand it publicly. And we see a kind of appetite for that in the Biden administration. So it's not surprising, but
Sure.
I think that's what should be chilling to people, is that it's not some sort of secret, covert effort. It's something that they're out in the open talking about, because now we're at a point in this country where we believe, a chunk of us, a significant chunk of us believes that speech is going to be unsafe, whether it's about COVID, whatever else it is, and the federal government needs to protect the public from dissent.
Mm-hmm. Well, but there is a piece of this, though, that really does frustrate me that I do think is kind of covert, which is they don't tell us all the stuff that they're trying to purge from the internet. It is true that they brag about their efforts to get the companies to censor this content. It's the reason why a Democrat senator is telling us about it this week. They're kind of proudly saying, we're protecting you by having these social media companies censor the American people. But what they're not telling us is, well, what specific topics are you censoring? Why? What's wrong about it? Like, for instance, I remember there was some sort of COVID segment, I think, that Tucker Carlson did back when he had the Fox News show. And the White House had successfully browbeat the big tech, Facebook specifically, to stop allowing the video to get reach on the platform. They had suppressed the reach of an American journalist because they didn't like the segment that he did. So why not just make the case in public about whatever issue you care about, instead of like going behind our backs and censoring what we see in our algorithms?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I feel like they still try to have it both ways. And I think probably because of legal reasons, they were hauled into court, hauled in front of the Supreme Court, in fact. It didn't take too long for that to happen. And so, it may be that they try to dodge these legal bullets, and that they try to split hairs and say, this isn't censorship, this is protection, this is for everyone's own good, this is for the benefit of all of us, this is just, tending to the weeds of the free speech garden, whatever it is that they say.
Yeah.
So I agree. I mean, every communication that they have with the FBI about public speech, unless there's a significant national security concern, I think they should have to put it in a database that's publicly accessible, because it's, we need to know exactly what speech the government is pressuring private actors to censor.
For sure. So let's move from to the extent that we can have any good faith interpretations of what's going on here to, I think, a realist interpretation of what's happening here. This is happening, again, 6 months from the election. The last time we saw this play out, in 2020, there was a very specific effort afoot to protect Joe Biden and get him across the finish line. They were suppressing information about his family's income at the expense of the United States ahead of the election. And they were pressuring the big tech companies to do that. And it was organized by active CIA people at the time and 51 intelligence officials, all still very close to the government, and Antony Blinken and all of these guys. They were all involved in an effort to force the big tech companies to censor the American people. So why shouldn't we believe that's happening again right now in this election, Emily?
Yeah, and I think we just got all the evidence that we needed that, it probably will, just by the fact that this confirmation comes in the run-up to the presidential election. I mean, we're basically in the summer before the presidential election at this point. So they'll make all of these arguments about, and we've seen it. And again, to some extent, your point is so valid, Vince. Like, they're often now happy to admit it because they think they can put it in this with this phrasing that, to their base that demands this type of censorship. It meets all of those standards. They can say this is only about dangerous purveyors of Russian disinformation. That they are likely going to drop that out again. That in some way that's become their pretense for censorship. It's become their pretense for surveillance. They can basically stretch anything to be a concern over Russian disinformation or Russian interference. So they will, I have no doubt that they will find another excuse to do that again. It just seems completely obvious, especially now that there's just, we're less than a year away from the election, and they're announcing they're back at it, basically.
Yeah, we're getting very close. Now, let me move to another story in the last 24 hours that fits the same topic, which is Wired Magazine, or I guess Wired is the name of the website, has, I would say, a very important report on the FBI's surveillance, spying on American citizens. The headline is Top FBI Official Urges Agents to Use Warrantless Wiretaps on U.S. Soil. And they say they've obtained an April 20th email. So this is not that long ago, a couple days ago, authored by FBI Deputy Director Paul Abate to employees. And it says the following: to continue to demonstrate why tools like this, that is Section 702 spying on American citizens, are essential to our mission, we need to use them. He emphasizes use. He puts it in italics, while also holding ourselves accountable for doing so properly and in compliance with legal requirements. He further says, I urge everyone to continue to look for ways to appropriately use U.S. person queries to advance the mission, with the added confidence that this new pre-approval requirement will help ensure that those queries are fully compliant with the law. So this comes in the wake of Congress once again re-upping this spying authority for the FBI. And you have an FBI senior official, Emily Jashinsky, ordering his subordinates, you have to use this a lot in order for us to justify even having this power. So please, use it, use it, use it, use it. How else should I read that email?
No, I think that's exactly what it is. This is the closest you'll get to like someone saying wink, wink, nod, nod in an email like that, especially someone, by the way, from the FBI as a senior position in the FBI. And that April 20th memo means that it was in such close proximity to the passing of the bill that you can basically only read it in one way. It is urging the FBI, now that it has more quote unquote lawful authority, the continuation of the lawful authority, to use the lawful authority to the full extent of their ability. It's urging them to do that pretty clearly. And what I think is important for people to understand about Section 702 in particular is that, yes, Congress passed this bill reauthorizing it, and it is quote unquote lawful. It is patently, obviously unconstitutional surveillance. And so the way to read this, and even if it, people will say, well, it's been held up in court, et cetera, it is unconstitutional.
Yeah, because the court system has been so fair lately. Haven't you noticed?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And just so unbiased towards the government. But yes, it's obviously, it's one of those things that if you explained it to a third grader, they'd be like, oh, you can't do that, can you?
Yeah.
Here you have him urging you to do more.
No, Schoolhouse Rock didn't cover this particular topic. No, not at all. There's adding to this is there's a Democrat congresswoman by the name of Zoe Lofgren from California. She's quoted in the Wired piece as saying that the FBI apparently lied to Congress about this because she says, the deputy director's email seems to show that the FBI is actively pushing for more surveillance of Americans, not out of necessity, but as a default. This directly contradicts earlier assertions from the FBI during the debate over Section 702's reauthorization. Yeah, no kidding. Why is it that there were? I'm really disappointed that this happened, and this happened in no small part due to Speaker Mike Johnson helped push it over the finish line. He was literally the tie-breaking vote to prevent a warrant requirement from being put into this law. Congress just went along with the FBI's line here, Emily. They just said, okay, yeah, whatever you tell us, we'll do it, when in fact the FBI was lying to Congress.
Yeah, by the way, after Mike Johnson said that, Glenn Greenwald just absolutely took him to the cleaners on this. Mike Johnson went on Glenn Greenwald's show and said very clearly that the FISA abuse is a serious problem, that 702 abuse specifically is a serious problem. He just completely changed his mind in a way that almost defies satire and became the person who was instrumental basically in getting this reauthorized. When we know, I mean, when it says your point about Zoe Lofgren, we knew for years that abuse of 702 had been rampant because the government admitted it. They had to cop to rampant abuse of the system because they had been rampantly abusing it. And so basically Congress just took them at their word that with reauthorization, they're going to be careful. There's these new safeguards in place. Well, duh. FISA itself came out of the Church Committee, which was meant to put safeguards on the intel community, and it's been rampantly abused for years now. So the safeguards don't necessarily prevent abuse. I mean, it's laughable.
Once again, the third grader can detect that something called the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act should not be used to spy on American citizens. So this is not, again, hard to follow, but the government, they abuse it at every turn. They really do. Emily, as always, thanks for your excellent work and your time today. I really appreciate you, as always.
Thank you, Vince.
There's Emily Jashinsky over at the Federalist Radio Hour, Counterpoints, and, of course, every so often, the Vince Coglianese Show. Coming up. All right, let's go to the phones. Line 3, that's where Greg is in Summer Duck, Virginia. Greg, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Good afternoon, sir. What I'm learning about, or what I have known for quite a while, is exactly what's going on. It's the same thing that Hitler did during World War II. He only allowed out what he wanted everybody to think or know, or stories. That's what I got to say about that. I mean, I guess we're going to have to call WMAL Radio Free America. I don't know.
You know, what you're talking about is right. You know, the Nazis, the Germans, the Nazis, they had a Ministry of Propaganda. They actually just named it the Ministry of Propaganda. The Biden administration tries to set up things like the Disinformation Governance Board, you know, to moderate what you're allowed to see and hear. And the Nazis, you know, the way they handled things, they banned art. Especially Jewish artists. No Jewish art allowed. No Jewish art. Jewish composers, music, books. Of course. What did Nazis do with books that they didn't like?
They burned them.
They burned them. They were book burners. Yeah, that's kind of the whole deal. This censorship was one of the defining features of the regime, no question. And Greg, you're right to keep your antenna up about what's happening in our own country right now. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it.
Besides the propaganda, it's the same thing that's going on with the fascists. They're the fascists.
Big time.
So that's all I got to say about it.
Big time. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that call. Let me take Stephen in Baltimore now, line 4. Stephen, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. Thank you very much for taking my call. I was just calling in to let you know that you mentioned that Wired article, and I tried to post that twice on Facebook today, and they blocked it both times, saying that I had violated their community standards or some crap like that.
Thank you for censoring yourself just now. So wait, so they said that you generically violated community standards, but they didn't actually give you any real reason of any kind?
Negative. I'm looking at it right now. It says, we removed your post. Updates on this decision. You'll hear back from us soon. And I haven't heard anything.
Did you write any text on it other than the link itself?
Yeah, I said Facebook doesn't want this information getting out to the masses. That was the second one I sent.
And that's it?
That one too.
That's all you said? That's tame. That's not...
That is it. And I can email you the screenshot.
I believe you, though. Stephen, that's par for the course, isn't it? So what we're... so here you have the intel community, the FBI... They're saying, go ahead, spy rampantly on American citizens. We've got to justify why Congress just reauthorized this power. Spy, 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 spy. Stephen in Baltimore is like, hey, that's an interesting article. I think people that I know should see it. So he tries to share it on Facebook, where so many people are. Facebook intercepts it and says, how dare you? What did I do? You violated community standards. You should know better, Stephen. Thank you for telling us about that. All right, coming up, we'll be joined by Mike Davis in the next hour. We've got to talk about Stormy Daniels and her ridiculous testimony in New York, and Ben Weingarten's on the way as well. We talked to him about Joe Biden deciding, who needs Israel?